Ready to rock and roll. So my name is Rob Peterson. Welcome to Effective Tools of Supervision with Agnes Barcelo and Ethan Phelps. So I'll be moderating and following the chat for this session. We are recording this session for future use. Your microphone should already be muted, but please confirm if it isn't muted. To ensure engagement during the session, we ask that you keep your cameras on throughout the training. We will be using the chat as question and answer, so please put your questions in the chat and I will answer them or direct them to the presenters as appropriate. We'll have additional time for questions at the end of the session. And without further ado, take it away, Agnes Barcelo and Ethan Phelps.
Well, thank you, Rob.
All right.
So welcome everybody to Effective Tools of Supervision. As Rob said, my name is Ethan Phelps and I am the Parks Regional Manager for Region 1 in the southeastern part of the state. And joining me here today is Agnes Barcelo, our Department Operations Manager, who you met yesterday, if you didn't already know Agnes. This class, as you may guess, is all about supervising staff in Vermont State Parks. Now we know and we recognize and want to understand and congratulate our many
774
returning
205 02
I know that
04.
voice. I think that's Chad Ummel.
So we just want to acknowledge and congratulate our many returning managers that we have on this training. So much of this will be review and refresher for you. But we also want to welcome all of our new managers that we have today and say that whether you have decades of supervisory experience or whether you're a new supervisor, there's some basic core supervisory skills that you will need to thrive and succeed within our state park system. So we have a short period of time to get through a lot of stuff. So Agnes and I have created this supervisory blueprint that we think will help set you up for success this summer. It covers staff training, establishing a healthy workplace culture, and communication. And under the communication umbrella, we'll discuss providing feedback, staff meetings, performance evaluations, and how to have difficult conversations with challenging employees. So before we continue, we have a short exercise designed to get our creative juices flowing and thinking about the craft of supervision. Let's talk a little bit about supervisors that you've had in the past and take a minute to share some info. Everyone has had a supervisor before if you've ever had a job, and my guess is that everybody in this meeting has held a position somewhere at some point. Some of those supervisors may have inspired and motivated you and really exuded greatness, while others may have not been as great, made you feel deflated, or made coming to work less desirable or less comfortable. And maybe some of those supervisors were mediocre. They weren't terrible, they weren't great. They just kind of skated by, and chances are you may not even remember them unless you really think about it. So Agnes is going to put a link to a short survey in the chat here. We'd like you to think about the qualities, traits, and actions of the best and worst supervisors that you've had. Think about the positive traits. What made them a great supervisor? How did they motivate you at work? Also, we'd like you to think about the qualities, traits, and actions of the mediocre or poor supervisors that you've had. So click on the link in the chat and just complete that quick survey. We'd like to know a few things about the supervisors that you've had that you've worked for, and we'll share the results of those at the end of the presentation. So we'll take a second here to let you complete that survey, and while we move to the next slide.
And I should say too that just so everybody knows, the survey, when you enter it, I can't see who's entered it. So it's completely anonymous on the back end when I'm looking at information. So just to throw that out there.
So, and also we do know that if you're logged into this session on your own as a guest, you may not have access to the survey. We apologize for that if that happens to you.
Okay, let me see if I can change something really quick while folks are filling that out. I see that people are saying that it requires a login, but let me just see if I can change anything on here. Yeah,
think if you're not logged into the state's network, it may have a problem.
okay. I'm going to try to see if I can change a setting. Okay, and I'm going to maybe put in, I've got a couple, I'm going to switch this around. I'm going to try this again, and let's see if this might work for folks now. And we should still be able to see the same responses. So give it a try. If you aren't able to get access, try it now and see if it works. And if it doesn't work, I'm sorry. It's a glitch that we learned this in the Matrix.
Thank you. Anthony, this is Barb McGregor with Vermont State Parks.
Let's see here.
I guess we haven't gotten it. Are you going to be working for us or not?
Did they mute you or did you mute yourself?
Yeah, we got to mute Barb.
Got it.
Cool, thanks.
I'm sorry. Are you?
Cool. So I'm going to look here on my end. Oh, sweet. All right. You guys are fast typers, and hopefully some people were able to get in access that weren't able to get access before. All right. Got 13 folks feeling like another little bit. If you're waiting, if you're one that's completed, maybe a good chance to do a breathing exercise. I don't know about you all, but that kind of changed the rest of my day yesterday after doing the belly breathing. It was really nice. Okay, I'm going to quick check and see where things are looking for that. All right, cool. Oh, nice work. Did belly breathing all the way to work today. That's awesome. All right, so it looks like we've got a good number coming in. So I'm just going to, for the sake of time, switch back over and talk to you all about our workplace and our culture, workplace culture in Vermont State Parks. So yesterday we had Mara Iverson come in and she presented talking about equity in the parks. And I want to make sure to drive home that a huge part of our culture within Vermont State Parks is to make sure that everybody feels safe, welcomed, and that it's also an inclusive place. So we're really striving to have diversity, equity, and inclusion work as part of our workplace culture. Again, I'm just going to mention it, say it out loud, because I can't begin to drive it home enough. If there's any, if there's a resource that you would like to tap into, if there's anything that we can do, if there's a speaker that you know of that you think would be a great benefit to us, if there's something that you see, if you have anything, cool article that you've read on social media, send it our way, because we definitely want to get that information out to everybody. So just making sure that, keep that in the forefront of your mind, that working towards being a safe, welcoming, and inclusive place should be something that's part of what you want to do and what you strive to do at work. I should also mention that there are quite a bit of, there's homework on workplace laws and policies for everybody to know about. Included in that, there's non-discrimination policies. I'll talk about those a little bit more. But really, I have to say that in all reality, supervising and managing your park staff goes way above and beyond the laws and policies. Really, in a lot of ways, supervising your staff is pretty much about having common sense. So as we're going through the season, if you could magically pull your staff, sometime you should ask them, why they enjoy working for you, and see what garner any sort of feedback that you can get. And if you had that opportunity to do it, run with it. But if not, kind of think about what you feel your staff might say about you. Would they respect your leadership, your management style? Would they feel that they're being treated respectfully and fairly? Would they feel like they're being treated with dignity, with kindness? So keep these things in mind, because really it's all about a common sense test that, are we providing a workplace that has a positive culture? And I think you'll find it much easier to treat your employees as you envision what your great supervisor, what you're adding in on the chat, or I'm sorry, on the forums. If you're able to treat your staff that way, you're going to end up having a much, much, much easier season.
Okay, so as Agnes was just saying, as a supervisor, it doesn't really matter whether your workplace is inside an office building or out in a beautiful park like this all the time. Everybody has to comply with workplace laws and policies. And as a manager, you play an important role in this. One thing in particular that we want to take a second to talk about is sexual harassment. And in particular, because it's finally getting treated as the serious workplace problem that it's been for decades. Sexual harassment has been against the law for well over 50 years, codified with the Civil Rights Act of 1965, with a lot of follow-up legislation that has strengthened protections. But little has been done to take the matter seriously on a wide scale until recently. For far too long, sexual harassment has been normalized in workplaces by supervisors that have either ignored it or, probably more often, haven't really known what to do about it or how to confront situations, and from coworkers that have been complacent and victims that haven't been believed or supported. With the size of our workforce that we have here in Vermont State Parks, there's a good chance that at least some of you will have to address sexual harassment at work this summer. And harassment doesn't involve just employees. Visitors can be involved as well. And this is why we require everyone each and every year to review our sexual harassment training. We just lost our screen share. Sorry about that. Okay. So we want you to review this training so that you'll know exactly what to do if you observe it or hear about it. There's a module to complete in our new learning management system that's a sexual harassment training. So as part of your required coursework, you'll complete that. But we want you to know that if you have questions or concerns after you complete the module, don't hesitate to call on any of your regional staff. We'll be glad to assist you or provide you with more information.
All right, awesome. You gotta love it when there's something that says PMM Chapter 200 and required workplace posting. So there are two major resources for you in regards to HR policies, so human resources policies. They are the Park Manager Manual, that is Chapter 200. That's one spot. And then the other spot where you're going to want to find other information is on our staff website, which again is vtstateparks.com/staff. You will find one of the links is required postings. If you're a new manager, definitely take some time, review that. Also, if you are a manager that's returning, I just want to mention that you're also going to want to print out new ones, because there are two new posters that are in there, in particular from our civil rights coordinator, Carla Ramundi. So there's a non-discrimination notice in there that's definitely really important, and make sure that all your staff are aware of these. These posters, make sure to hang them up somewhere that's obvious. This is a requirement by law that we have these posted. So put them up in like the garage or in a bathroom. So make sure to put those up, have those hanging up. Be really wonderful if you could do that kind of this week, maybe. Good day, it's raining out today. A lot of information is definitely out there. So bottom line for you as a manager is to be as aware as possible as you can about HR, any sort of HR policies. Also, when thinking about HR policies, it's really important for you to set clear expectations for your staff's workplace behaviors. And I mention this because in a minute, we'll weave this into how your staff meetings and performance assessments can help with this as well. All right.
Okay. So I want to take a moment here to talk about something that can be particularly challenging as a supervisor, and that is how we manage and how you may have to manage staff housing as a manager, particularly those of you that have multiple housing units for staff in your parks. We strive to give our residential staff decent housing, but it's often in front and center of the public eye. And because it's part of the public infrastructure that's part of a park, it's not really like a private house that you may own or rent on your own. So there's some things that we have to keep in mind that can be challenging for you as a manager to have to confront with staff if you have to. So we'd like you and your residential staff to keep these points in mind. The interior and the exterior need to be neat and tidy, like all parts of the park. That means not a lot of recycling or trash or things left on porches. Put things away, keep things picked up. There are federal laws that prohibit political signage on public property, and that applies to our staff houses and our parks. So we can't allow that. Staff have to respect our rules just like our guests do, and in this case, think quiet hours. While marijuana may be legal at the state level in Vermont, growing or using it on public property is prohibited, period. And that absolutely includes our staff residences. And that staff that bring pets to live with them must first have the regional manager's explicit permission to have pets on site. And secondly, and at least as importantly, our staff's pets must set the example for visitors' pets.
All right, cool. So now thinking as a supervisor, you're probably wondering about training. I'm sure now that you're in training, you're probably thinking about how am I going to train all my staff? So it's important to note that your employees will be starting in batches, or they kind of onboard in batches, which this we understand can definitely be challenging. So when you're thinking about training, you got to think about when people's start dates are. So for example, many of your park attendants might be starting in the next few weeks, some just prior to Memorial Day, and then others might be starting in mid to late June. So I just encourage you to make sure to keep that in mind when you're planning any sort of training. And then finally, unfortunately, I hate saying this, but sometimes people they'll maybe work for us for a couple of weeks and they're like, this isn't exactly what I thought I was signing up for, or wow, I know you said I was going to be cleaning toilets, but I didn't know I was going to be cleaning toilets every day. There sometimes is attrition. So you may have some staff that will start up in July. So keep that in mind as can be kind of challenging for us to backfill people later in the summer. So it's really important for you, as a supervisor, set yourself up to be a rock star, because if you can do a really great job, then your staff are going to want to also do a really great job and will stay around and hopefully be there until the last day of the season. All right. So on the next note of training, you might be wondering, where do I start with this? My best recommendation for everybody is to start digging around on the staff website. Can we get a show of hands as to how many people have started digging around on there? Has anybody started digging around? Yes. Let's see. And it's vtstateparks.com/staff. And I should mention too, this is an internal facing website. So it's stuff that should only be used. You should only have the link should be used for staff. So if folks have or haven't started digging around, I encourage you to do so. And I'm going to share my screen really quick and show it to you as well. Let me see here. I have so many things open. I am at some point in time, y'all, going to put into the bingo. I'm going to send you all bingo sheet because I know I've been saying many things. And I think this is not it. Yeah, cool. I did it. All right. So you should be able to see my screen. So in here, this is our staff website. Look at all these wonderful people. This is a great website for you to start digging into. We have reports on here. You can also find, if you scroll down, you can see manuals. Click on it, choose manual, park management manual. That's one that we've been referring to. This book, imagine if it was a book. This manual is really kind of your go-to. One nice thing, and let me know if you can't see my screen anymore, is if you know about Control F, it is going to make your life a lot easier. So as I'm looking up in the park manager manual, I want to look up what our policy is on horses. I put in Control F and it brought me to where it is. So dig around. See what you can find out. And there's definitely things in the park manager manual regarding staff evaluations, regarding training, starting points, training matrices. Those are all in the park manager manual. So definitely start off there. Additionally, I had mentioned this yesterday in our training that Ryan and I did about the CAPS classes. So let's see here. Scrolling down, training, mandatory training for all employees. If you click on this, this is what brings you to the CAPS system. So the Learning Management System curriculum. And this page right here, this has got the login, and this is where you'll enter your employee ID number. Again, as soon as we'll get that to you right away if you're new. And then your password is right here. So this is where you'll log in. Everybody, all staff are going to need to do this. This is a mandatory training for everybody. So make sure that on your first day or on your staff's first day, that everybody goes through and does all the trainings that are on there. If you haven't started, plugging away at those, I would encourage you to do so. Log in and start finding those trainings so that way you can get ahead of that. So in there, we have a sexual harassment training. We have a OSHA training as well for bloodborne pathogens. There's also PPE, fire extinguishers. There's quite a few different trainings that are in there. So I definitely encourage folks to get in on starting those. And then also you'll want to have your staff do those on their first day of work as well too. All right, let's see here. Okay, also, the park management manual, there is an attendant training and information form or packet, and it covers a lot of information. And if I have it, there it is right there. So that has all the things that would be important for you to go over with your staff. So keep this in mind. Check through each one. And these are also for those of you who are new. This is good for you to have an idea of where you need to go. So check this form out. Again, it's in the park manager manual, which you just saw where that is. So you'll want to dig into that for sure.
Okay, so let's move on and talk about communication for a little bit. Effective communication in an organization the size of ours is essential. We have about 450 employees total, 55 parks, 4 management regions, and a central office. The foundation of solid communication within an organization like ours starts at the park level between you and the people that you supervise and work with. So we'll discuss 3 different types of communication: employee feedback, positive and critical, communication through staff meetings, and communication with the regional staff. So when providing feedback to staff, hands down, the most rewarding kind of feedback, providing feedback can be the most rewarding part of your job, but also the most challenging. So positive feedback. When we give positive feedback, we may be giving it to a specific person, but we may also be indirectly communicating to other staff members nearby. We never want to give negative feedback this way. We'll cover that in more detail in a few minutes. But positive feedback can be a motivating for both the person receiving it and create awareness of your expectations to other staff members nearby. So if you see it, say it. Hey, Agnes.
Yeah.
Hey, I really like the way that you handled that difficult customer. I know they were really grumpy and they were pretty rude to you, but you were really polite. And I know that couldn't have been easy to maintain your composure. So you did a really great job there. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks, Ethan. I appreciate that feedback.
So keep your positive feedback positive. We don't recommend using the sandwich approach when you have something that you've got to deliver. Keep positive feedback positive, and more often than not, we give positive feedback. And it gives meaning to the behavior that we're seeing is generally reasonable and appropriate. So difficult conversations, right? Pretty obvious. Difficult conversations are not easy. We don't like them, but we got to do it. So as an example, you may have an employee that's always 10 minutes late doesn't adequately clean the bathrooms, and has a poor attitude. So we got to do something to address this. It's easy to avoid having a conversation and wait the season out, right? If this is, the end of July, you may be thinking, I just have 5 more weeks. We just got to make it through. I'll just grin and bear it, and I'll keep my mouth shut. But the right thing to do is to address it. Have the difficult conversation the right way, and maybe not some of the ways that some of those poor supervisors that you were identifying a few minutes ago may have. So now we have a short video that we'd like to show you about having difficult conversations. This will test my ability to multiple screen share here.
I have a feeling you're going to do great at this, Ethan.
I'm gonna get the sound to work here. Agnes, why does this always happen to me when I screen share?
I don't know, because we're human. I think that's the only reason I can come up with. That weird button that says audio. I'm not hearing it, Ethan, just so you know. It's the share audio button that's really in a weird spot. And I think you almost need to hit it before it starts.
Did everybody hear that?
No.
Okay.
It's all good. Have any of you ever done a presentation on Teams before? I don't know if any of you ever have, but it can sometimes, it's a lot. Okay.
Here we go.
Just humanizing it for you right now, Ethan. We're all human.
To give you an idea of how we can work with you to do things differently, we're sharing our approach to the difficult conversation, something that we often avoid having. So what are these conversations? Why do we avoid having them? Where do we go wrong? We avoid them because we think they'll end up in an argument and there will be bad feeling afterwards. We worry that the conversation will only make things worse. We don't feel equipped to deliver our important message and stay on good terms. We persuade ourselves that the situation will sort itself out. All valid reasons, but sadly ones that mean we're stuck, not moving forward to address something which is likely to get worse, begin to impact on morale, motivation, and performance. So where do we start? We begin by collecting the evidence, and here's why this is so important. Let's start with a scenario. A person in a team who always does just enough to get the job done. Never volunteers to help, is always the last to arrive and the first to leave. Lazy, inconsiderate, arrogant. It's time to have a word with them as this has gone on long enough. So we do all the right things. We take them to one side away from the team. We share our perceptions in what we think is an objective and non-judgmental way. And the response we get is not quite what we bargained for. It's the word lazy that does it. It's disapproving and emotive, and not surprising you get a bad reaction. If you use labels to describe behaviour, people are likely to get upset. It's your opinion and your view will differ to someone else, and it doesn't help because the person still doesn't understand the actual behaviour that's causing the problem. So instead of trying to summarise what we're trying to change by using the label lazy, let's think about what lazy looks like. How have you seen the person behave? What did they do? What did they say? Imagine that you're filming them on your phone. What would you see? Once you've identified these examples of actual behaviour, you can begin to describe in clean language exactly what the performance gap looks like and what you'd like the person to do differently in the future. So preparing well before you have the conversation and being able to explain using clean language what the performance gap is are 2 essential first steps. So you've done your preparation, which includes finding an appropriate time and private place to chat. What next? Name it. Get to the point. No making conversation about the weather or last night's TV. Take a deep breath and tell them what you've noticed by giving specific incidents. Follow up with the impact before they start to explain their behaviour. At this point, the temptation is often to sweeten the pill or soften the blow. Stop. Don't go there. Don't dilute your message or its impact. Wait for them to respond and continue by asking open questions to clarify your understanding. So you've established the issue, listened to the explanation, and discussed what needs to happen next time. Job done. Or is it? Remember, we worry that our relationship might go wrong or people will get upset. So the final thing to do is make sure you end the conversation on a positive and encouraging note. So let's summarize the main steps you need to take to have a difficult conversation. 1. Prepare. 2. Name it. 3. Impact. 4. Next time. 5. Encourage. 6. Monitor and review. If you're still worried about using this approach to resolve difficult issues, why not practice it first by using it to recognize good work or to praise someone? You'll find it works just as well. Like all skills, if you want to do it well, you have to practice. And this may be a good way to start and give you the confidence to resolve more challenging situations. Good luck. And remember, while it may be difficult at the time, if you follow these steps, you will make progress and be glad that you had the conversation.
Okay. Switch our screen share back here. So apologize if the audio may have cut out a few times, but we can post a link to that video in the chat if anybody wants to watch it on their own. Get back to where we need to be here.
As that's loading too, I guess I'll say, Ethan, that having difficult conversations is definitely one of the hardest parts of the job sometimes. So just want to reemphasize to everybody that if you do feel like you have a difficult conversation you need to have with somebody, practicing it, kind of similar that they mentioned, is always a helpful thing. You know, like I can't tell, it's like when you pick up the phone before you're going to call somebody and you practice what you're going to say. If you're going to have a difficult conversation, sometimes it's a good thing to practice what you're going to say. And ask your assistant maybe if they can help you out, or your manager.
Yeah, don't be afraid to reach out to your regional operations staff. We're absolutely all here to support you and help you work through any of these conversations. So I hope that we hope that there were a few strategies there that maybe you weren't familiar with, or will help you with practicing and dealing with difficult conversations more directly. And that if you're open-minded to trying these approaches, that they can work and be successful for both you and your staff.
Yeah, actually, I'm just going to jump on that too. There's a mention about an assistant as a witness. Always a good thing if you ever have to have a difficult conversation. We'll talk about that too, is that having, doing it with somebody else present is always a very helpful, just a smart way to do it. And also really can be helpful to fill in any sort of gaps. So switching gears, want to talk about effective staff meetings. Communicating with your staff is probably one of the most valuable things you can do. We talked yesterday when we did the self-care EAP training. We try to model that check-in. It's really, really, really important to check in and see how your staff is doing. And one of the best things you can do is to start off with a staff meeting. This is a great opportunity anytime you have a staff meeting to be able to demonstrate to your staff what your management style is. And it's also a really good way for you to kind of kick off for the rest of the season. So highly recommend that, each week at a minimum, you meet with your assistant manager, or assistant manager meets with the manager to kind of check in. But pretty much you should be every day having a meeting of sorts. I will say any words of advice I can give before having any sort of staff meeting is taking a belly breath, taking a deep breath, and making sure that you're in a really good frame of mind. This will help you model what you're looking for in your staff, and it'll help you present whatever you have to talk about in a way that hopefully will come off as transparent, clear, not enraged in emotion, and people will be much more receptive. It's wildly critical that I mentioned to you that you really sometimes have to put your personal feelings aside when facilitating a meeting. There might be a moment where, everybody last night, you had somebody, whatever crew was on working in the evening and say they didn't do anything. They all just decided to have a picnic lunch, right? And nothing happened. And there was a million visitors in the park. If you came in fuming, it might not be the best thing. So it might be better to have a cool, calm approach. It's also important to remember too, that while you're living at the park, things may happen that you may see, that are happening within your own personal life. So when you are coming into a meeting, just remember that it's not your home. It's where, you're at work. So make sure that you want to have the meetings have really kind of a professional air, and they're not a place really for airing out any sort of personal grievances. And it's important to remember that you're a team and your coworkers, and you're going to be seeing each other often. So making sure that it's just, those who are at the meetings are just the staff that are, working in the park. If you are in a, as we mentioned before about living situations, you may have a partner that's living there, just making sure that it's just coworkers that are in the meetings. And also keep in mind that having conversations with them, you don't want to maybe necessarily have it like you might with your partner or your sibling, somebody who knows you really well, and just make sure that you keep it, professional when you have these meetings. I should mention too that it's really a great thing to get one started every morning with your staff, or if there's a change in shift, making sure that people have a meeting then. And this is a great point for you to talk about areas of improvement, like, hey, I noticed from this training session, we might need a little bit more work on that. Hey, I noticed that, bathrooms might need just a little bit more care. So make sure to definitely have effective staff meetings by creating a positive environment as well too, and making sure that your staff are able to give input as well as receive input as well. So digging in a little bit more, let me see here if I've got the right slide. Boom. So there's, again, mentioning the different types. There's preseason, you're going to want to have one, and then also daily tailgates, and that's where you give general announcements. So hold meetings as often as you can early in the season. This is where you're going to want to, fix any sort of HR policies, hold folks to expectations, set out what your guidelines are. I encourage you to get onto the manager manual and check out the personnel section. There you can see what the consistency is of what we need to have for standards, park to park, and what you can ask your staff to do. I do have a document that I want to drop into the chat, and this is kind of a what I would call a working document. And this is something that I used in regards to expectations. I wrote this up years ago when I was the manager at actually, I used this one when I was at, let me see here. Let me see if this will work. Sorry, this is a new thing. Oh boy. I wrote this up when I was at Elmore forever ago. And I used this with my staff, and we went over this document at the beginning of the season, and hopefully that will drop. Okay, I will get it in there. And it was an expectations list that I had been compiling for years. And I will tell you, when I set out expectations for my staff at the beginning of the season, it made life so much better. So I'm going to share that all. Let's see, I really want to get this to y'all. Boom. Show off my abilities of dropping things into the chat. Come here, you. All right, I'll get it in there, I promise. I'm not having success right now. But setting up expectations for your staff is going to be one of the most critical things that you do. It will help drastically when you set up those expectations. I encourage you to also make sure that you add in the expectations that, number one, all of our workplaces are free from sexual harassment. Number two, that we're a safe, welcoming, inclusive place for all of our staff. Make sure that you add in any expectations about using the park truck. Add in any sort of expectations that you see need to be fit, but making sure that they're manageable and also tangible is really important for your staff as well. So hit that at the beginning of the season. Again, you're going to have staff onboarding at different points in time. So you may try to plan a big staff meeting for when everybody's on, but at least have people knowing what your expectations are is really important. You may also want to consider, if you have a lot that you need to go over with your staff, break it up into a couple of meetings, so you're not throwing everything at them at once, like we kind of are today, right? So one of the most important reasons for doing that is that you're able to give people digestible approaches. So it's always good to have things in different ways. Like you might have something printed out, have something on the computer, so that way if people need to go back and refer to something, they can. Also, if you need to, on the note of like kind of creating a cheat sheet, it's good for you to write down things. And I can't begin to express this enough, like keep a list. I'm old school from the 90s. We used to carry around what we called Palm Pilots, little spiral notebooks, and we would write down notes in those. Use that as a place to keep notes. That way you remember what you want to cover at your staff meeting. And make sure, again, to connect with your assistant manager or your manager to find out if there's notes that they noticed that also should be included on that. And then aside from your early meetings to set up in the season, it's also really important to have daily meetings. Meeting with your staff just before the park opens each day. It's like a tailgate meeting of sorts. And I will say, undoubtedly, these are probably the most critical staff meetings that you'll have. Make sure they're brief. You don't want to take too long when you're doing these meetings, because of course you want to be able to dive into work, but 10-15 minutes each day. And this is when you can give your staff updates. You can answer questions for them, provide any sort of check-ins like, oh, by the way, so-and-so got a flat tire. They're going to be coming in late for their shift today. Or by the way, that one kayak, the paddle's broken, or we may not want to rent that out. Or, oh, by the way, we have a flat tire on the mower. We're not going to be able to do any mowing today. So this is a really important time for you to make sure everybody is up to snuff. I will say, if anybody's ever worked in food service, you know the importance of the beginnings of these shifts meetings. So just make sure to have those undoubtedly every day that you can. Excuse me. Lastly, it's also important to have, you may have kind of special meetings that you may need to have with your staff as well too. Again, kind of mentioning where we were at yesterday, we want you to make sure to be able to create joy. So you may need to have meetings, or staff get together when you're starting to see people, maybe their energy starting to lag as the season progresses. Sometimes at the beginning of the season, month of June can be really, really rainy. Same with May, and sometimes we get the, bad weather blues. So those may be a time when you need to, check in with your staff and be like, all right, I understand we have been cleaning the beach for days on end, and it's raining and people are going, for what? Because the park hasn't opened yet, or it's really quiet. This is a good time to schedule an after hours picnic or cookout. Get everybody together. We do have funds available, so if you need to, we can help out with getting you some sort of, supplies if you need to. For any sort of get together. Also, as the season progresses, highly encourage you to have a mid-season gathering. After the park closes, have everybody, get together. It boosts up energy. It just feels good. And especially because, COVID, people have been really isolated. So it's really good to check in with each other and, have these get-togethers, and you might learn something about your coworker that you didn't know about them. And additionally, towards the end of the season, when people stop asking questions, or when people stop, throwing out ideas for projects, this is when fatigue can definitely see it starting to set in. So I would definitely recommend that people, you have a little, get together then, and that will be really helpful for energy.
Great, thanks, Agnes. And your regional staff will give you more information about some funds that we have available for you to help you with these, with providing some refreshments and food at some of your staff meetings. So as we are nearing the end of our time here this morning in our session, we're going to kind of fast forward to the end of the season and talk a little bit about end of season performance assessment. And We do recognize that this is kind of the lightning round of supervision, and we've covered a lot of ground here. Undoubtedly, we'll have to do a lot of follow-up, and that's fine. We'll all do that and continue to ask questions and reach out, and we will cover all this stuff again. So as Rob mentioned yesterday, we've made some changes and we've streamlined our employee performance evaluation process, which is kind of the capstone or the end of documentation of an employee's season. So we've done this to make the process easier for you and to make the feedback more direct and more valuable for the employee. So we showed you some approaches to dealing with difficult conversations, as well as offering feedback and praise. And remember that both of those approaches and both of those things are important. Studies have shown that people that are doing work that they really don't like often report that the reason that they voluntarily stay in their jobs, even though they're doing work that they don't like, is that it's because they feel appreciated. So that power of positive feedback really is indeed a powerful thing, and comes into play in a really important way here with performance assessment. So the main points to consider when doing written performance evaluation are: number one, complete them. We use them, we need them, they become part of an employee's file. And we need those to make hiring decisions, particularly if the employee isn't performing to our expectations. We need that as documentation. So another point to remember is that nothing can be a surprise in a written employee evaluation. Any issues that have been outlined in evaluation need to have been brought up and addressed previously. You can't lead an employee into thinking that everything's going fine and then hit them with a bunch of performance problems on a written piece of paper on their last day of work. Definitely, there's going to be good things and bad things that will come out. We understand that. Just be direct and deal with all of those as you do. Particularly, as Agnes mentioned, if there's, and as we talked about, if there's some issues with not so great performance, have another supervisor present when you deliver it. So here's where you find your written evaluation templates. They're all on the staff website, which you can see here. There are evaluations for every position, so managers, assistant managers, attendants, some of the Burton Island specific positions, the captains, the lifeguards, deckhands, interpreters, and campground volunteers. They have their own evaluation forms. Managers evaluate performance for attendants and assistant managers and volunteers. Regional operations managers evaluate park manager performance. Interpreter evaluations will be done by Rebecca Roy, our interpretive program manager, and that those of you that have interpreters in your parks, you will be connecting with her on so she can get your feedback on your interpreter's performance. So let's take a quick look here at what the revised attendant evaluation looks like. You'll see that the majority of it is just checkboxes for performance categories with different ratings. And then there's a comments box for a written summary. And be sure to provide written summary comments that back up your ratings, especially when you're checking a box for something that needs improvement or is just average. The final piece of this is that the evaluation needs to be delivered and signed by both the person writing the evaluation, who's the supervisor, and the employee, and dated. And then we get a copy of that, and they get a copy of that. So some rules of thumb for when you need to provide needs improvement. Again, it can't be the first time that they've heard it. Refer back to any of your notes or documentation that you've kept when you've done your verbal counseling sessions. Find that way to address the situation and identify areas to improve. And in the very rare case where we end up having to terminate someone or not hire them back, this is the type of documentation we need. And then in the Manager Manual Appendix 920, evaluations are covered in more detail, and there are examples filled out for you. There's one final kind of feedback that I want to just quickly mention called the supervisory feedback memo. Now, these are pretty rare, and they're used in very special situations where there's an extreme behavior that needs to be corrected immediately. An example might be an attendant who does a good job, but for some reason you can't get them to stop joyriding in the golf cart. They're speeding all the time. That's not just unsafe for the staff member, but it puts visitors and property in danger. So under no circumstances do we want to let that go unchecked. If it's been dealt with, no resolution, talk with your operations manager about delivering a supervisory feedback memo. And again, that's just a last resort type of tool, but it's pretty effective in getting an employee's deficient behavior turned around quickly because it gets their attention and it's pretty serious. So quickly to sum up, we want you to get your season off to the best start you can by having regular staff meetings, adjusting them to the various times of the season, and how many staff you have from early season all the way through the home stretch. Keeping communication going, by offering praise when it's deserved, as well as tackling difficult conversations when you need to with issues and address them as they arise. When offering negative feedback, be sure to do it discreetly and with kindness, but also be direct. Keep notes and use those notes from your counseling sessions when you need to, when you're completing your written evaluations. And again, there's examples in the manager manual.
And then I just want to end too that just making sure to mention, we mentioned it yesterday, communication with your regional staff, also known as your operations manager or regional manager. It is so critical to have that. And if you can have open communication with them, they're there as a resource to help you out. So we want you to be able to feel empowered to make decisions. But understand that there's also times when it's definitely two heads are better than one. So know that we are open. We have heard it all. We've seen it all. So know that there's, back and forth. If there's two-way conversations, everybody will be able to support each other that much more. So we would rather work with you in a proactive approach versus a reactive approach. So please feel free to be transparent. The more communication, the better communication we have. Things seem to pan out so much better. And I can understand hesitancy to say, oh, I don't want to tell my supervisor this happened. We would so much rather you tell your supervisor that something happened, because again, it's so much better to be responsive and approach or proactive versus reactive. And then lastly, just wanted to make a note too, and I'm going to try to be consistent with time, but in notes of communication, things may come up. This is an old school, this is the throwback to the Palm Pilot of what our comment cards are. We do have a visitor survey that gets sent out to folks after they've camped. We will oftentimes, if there's something that pops up, and that will relay to park staff, like, hey, we noticed this is happening, or if something big happens, if there's something happens in the park, it's always good to give your regional staff a heads up. Like if there's somebody that really is has some egregious complaint about something, so that way we can communicate back, because Mike Snyder, who you met on Monday, he's the commissioner, and things do go to his office. So the more we can keep everybody in the loop, better things are going to be in the long run. So additionally, check your email frequently. It's important to do so. You will be getting emails from either the regional team or also from the headquarters office. I have to make sure to note that anything that is written in email is considered public record. So be careful about what you write in emails. Any sort of sensitive information definitely should not be written in email. So, ask yourself before you send off an email, would I be comfortable if this was printed in the newspaper? Also, iPhones and texts. Some employees, everybody had to sign off on an SMS, consent to receive text messages. Some people didn't sign off on those. So don't assume that your staff wants to text with you. The iPhones that you all have, that is primarily for internal communication, and that the manager on duty should have that phone on them at all times and should be able to respond. So that phone number should be very rarely given out to the general public, if at all. That's what the park phone number is for. So just keep in mind text threads as well. Those are also can be considered public documents. So be mindful of what you're sending back and forth in text. Additionally, weekends and evenings. This is when a lot of things can happen in the park. So definitely don't hesitate to reach out to your regional support team if there is something that happens on the weekends. There is a pager set up for most regions, or there may be something else in place too. So be sure to check in with your regional staff as to who to call on the weekends and the evenings.
So thanks, everyone. We realize we're running a few minutes over, but Agnes, if you've got a few quick survey you want to show,
Totally.
And we'll get you out of here so you can have a few minutes break.
Yeah, and this is if you know, me as a my staff meetings, I try to make them sweet, but obviously you can tell I got the gift of gab, and sometimes they went over a little bit longer than expected. So we had 52 of you respond, which I appreciate it. I'll send more of these out, and again, I got to get that expectations document, so I'll send that to everybody. But there's some really nice things. These are what people loved about their favorite supervisor. They're kind, thoughtful, curious, gentle, reasonable, expectations. What qualities do you feel are important? Fair, empathetic, curious, wholeness, clear, be willing to have difficult conversations and make difficult decisions, dedicated. And this is an interesting one. Based on your past performance, do you feel that you have all the tools needed to be an effective supervisor? 74% of you answered yes. Nobody feels like they're not able to be an effective supervisor, so good on you. I still wonder if I'm an effective supervisor. Maybe that's a little humility, but I'm psyched for all of you who do feel like you've got the tools. That's great. Having an uncomfortable conversation with or moment with an employee. Yeah, it looks like all of us have, except for 5 of you, which, hey, that happens, but it's good to see that there's people having uncomfortable conversations. And then, are you comfortable giving clear and honest feedback to your staff? Looks like not a lot of you are. Looks like, you know, a majority of folks, 43% aren't. 21 depends on the staff. And then also, you know, 9% or 17 of you feel that you are. So definitely, again, resources. Reach out to your regional staff if you feel like you're having a difficult, or if you need to have a difficult conversation. Watch any of the CAPS videos. I don't want to say you can watch a video for everything, because it's always better to have a human interaction. But we're out there, and we want to be able to support you as best as we can. We want to be effective supervisors, so you could be effective supervisors. And I'm going to stop sharing that.
Thanks for your attention and participation, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody. You've got this. It's going to be a great summer. Think about that awesome supervisor you had. Channel their energy. And thanks for letting us go over.